These are guys who are under contract for this coming season. And JD made mention of maybe restructures coming for a few of the guys on this O-line. But this is the cap hit from a few of the guys here. And I also, from our starting linemen, I've also listed as to how long they're under contract for. So we got start off with guard Joe Thuney, $26.9 million cap hit. And he restructured last year. But he won't be a free. He'll be on the team for 2 more years. So not next offseason, the following offseason, he'll be a free agent. Jawaan Taylor, $24.7 million cap hit. His dead cap is like beyond that, to 30-something million. So I don't know if that's going to happen. Restricted free agent in 2027. So 3 more years of Jawaan Taylor. Now, Creed Humphrey, this is where we get into the nitty gritty here. So Creed Humphrey, $1.7 million cap hit, free agent next year. So this is his last year in Kansas City, unless they get a deal done. Our guy, Lucas Niang, some people thought he was going to be the tackle of the future in Kansas City. $1.3 million. He's a free agent next year. Wanye, he's going to be up in 3 years, so $1.2 million. Not really much there. Trey Smith, $1 million. That's a steal. Unrestricted free agent next year, so that's another one that they got to maybe think about. Long-term deals coming here. And then we got tackle. Can't pronounce his first name, but last name's Godric. He's one of these future. I think he's one of these future guys, NFL international kind of project. Not really making much. He's free agent next year. And then we got Mike Caliendo, who is an exclusive rights free agent this year, but based on what I've read, he's probably going to be kept around as an exclusive rights guy, not really making much, about $750K. So JD, when you look at this, obviously you got the big numbers here of Joe Thuney and Jawaan Taylor that stand out to you. Do you think that's where a lot is going to have to come from in order to extend guys like Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith? We're going to need to kind of, restructure some of these big deals we have here, because Thuney and Taylor, man, that's a big part of the cap here.
That's big. That's big, boy. That's a big chunk right there. That is without a doubt where some of that had to come from, without a doubt. So, and I don't think those guys will have an issue with it. I don't think they'll have a problem. At least I don't perceive them having a problem. The team obviously with Taylor were like, hey, look, man, we expected this, we didn't get that because of some of the penalties and whatnot. I'm sure they'll try to justify the cap hit being a little bit less than that. Same with Thuney, 26.9 million. Woo! Goodness gracious, Lord have mercy. Woo! But he's been playing great ball, man. He's a great guard. That injury changes things for him. So they'll probably restructure him for sure. Maybe try to get about $6 million back from him, 6 or 7.
So you tore your pick. So for some of the listeners and viewers who didn't know when we talked about it, when you had this initial pec injury, you actually tore your pec. So, and I don't know, they've been very hush hush of what the injury was, and based on him missing 3 weeks, I think it was, we could say it was a torn pry pec, where severity of it was. But did you feel like you played through it, obviously, which is just that's JD for you. But did you feel kind of ramifications of not ramifications, but residual effects of the pec injury, throughout, continuing to play? Would you still feel residuals from having the initial pec tear?
I mean, it was pain. And what I did was, and I don't know, because you had to think about, as far as pectoral, what part of the pec did he tear, or what was hurt? What did he strain? Mine was up here in the tight top left quadrant, I guess. And I tore that part from the bone. And like I said, probably, 50% of it, 60, like I said, still have a divot. The pain was the residual effect of that, but I was restricted because I had a harness that would keep me from going back. That was where the touchy part of it was, because I didn't want to extend it to the point where I tore it fully from the bone. And then I had to necessarily have surgery. So I was restricted from how far I could go back. But it was good because I still have range to do particular things. I just couldn't go back this far. You start doing that, then that's a whole different thing. I don't know where Thuney had his. That's what kind of made me question, like, okay, he's out for 3 weeks. Like, what's going on? Like, they may have thought it was bad enough where he may have to have surgery. Because a strain, I think a strain, it depends on where, like I said, where it was at. I don't know. It was kind of, I assume he was coming back. Especially if they put him on RR. They didn't say, surgery was needed. I assumed that he was coming back. And so maybe it was just so uncomfortable for him, or maybe they didn't want to put him in jeopardy and they didn't want to say anything and just kind of let it linger for a little bit. Like, hey, maybe he can, maybe he can't. And so kind of left it up to him.
And they ruled him out so early too. That the week of the Super Bowl it was like Monday or Tuesday. It was like, yeah, it's not looking good for him. I was like, okay, yeah, he's not playing. So I mean, yeah. But is that injury? Because obviously, when a guy tears his ACL, MCL, front office can use it. Like, hey, man, like, can restructure this? Coming back from a really brutal injury. Is that the type of injury where they can say, like, hey, like, coming off of a really bad injury? Like, I mean, it's a torn pec, but obviously we don't know where it is in the pec to say,
Right. Yeah. So it's the muscle, tears. It can be significant or strain, or how they want to, fiber strain or tears. They call those strains. Yeah, I have no idea what part of the pec it was. Like I said, I know where mine was, and I've seen other guys who have torn pecs and other things of that nature. Still play, still come out and play. Like I said, same thing with a harness. When I spoke to the doctor, the team doctors, and was talking to him, what all my options were. And, it went from, hey, we're thinking about having surgery to, hey, you want to wear a harness. And I was opposed to like having surgery. I was like, I don't want to go under the knife if I don't have to. And so there was like an option, like, hey, some guys, if they have 50% torn or whatever, we might have to go to the knife to pull the muscle back out and attach it back. That's a possibility. And I didn't feel like doing that. I was like, so what's the other options? And so the other option was try to let it heal on itself, wear a harness to still play. And that's what I opted to do. Yeah, that kind of shocked me a little bit about Thuney. Shocked me a little bit.
Yeah. So one of the biggest talks, obviously, the biggest talk of the free agency, we've mentioned it. Chris Jones, L'Jarius Sneed, that's going to be the kickoff to everything. But a lot of people are talking about the extension aspect of guys like Creed Humphrey, of Trey Smith, even guys on defensively. Talking about Nick Bolton possibly getting an extension this offseason. So that's how good of rookie classes we've struck on the last few years. But when we look at Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, obviously the hope is they can extend both these guys and keep them. Of the two, between Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey, who do you see has more of an importance on the O line? Who would be a harder guy to replace between a Creed Humphrey or Trey Smith type?
Oh, man. Maybe Creed. Creed, because he's making all the calls. That's one thing you have to take into account. Finding a good center, man, it's very important because you snap the football. All right, you got to make the calls, set the defense, and then you're playing all everywhere around you. You got both guards, kind of, their jobs. So you got some heavy-handed guys inside that you got to be able to get. I think you could possibly find good guards in the league, because you have two guys on outside and inside of you. The center does, but he's got a little different duty. I would say that would be the hardest thing. We're probably trying to get Creed, somebody like that here. I mean, Trey is as valuable as Creed is for what we do, and trying to find a guy that can do what Trey does. Maybe an easier task. So that's my assessment. If I had to take two, if I'm looking at the two different guys, Marcus, yeah, probably Creed would be probably the harder guy to to substitute for him.
Yeah.
Place.
We've had luck with centers over the last. I mean, we've literally gone from last few years, gone from Rodney Hudson to Mitch Morse to Creed Humphrey, essentially, and that's pretty much been the last three guys that we've had here in this room, which has been awesome to go from those three guys. Now, talk about Trey Smith, and so obviously Jawaan Taylor's had issues and whatnot this year with the holdings, the false starts, but having Trey Smith with them, I think, would you say maybe covered up some other deficiencies that Jawaan Taylor may have had, having Trey Smith with them? And that's also something too. It's like, yeah, we're paying Jawaan Taylor all this money, but like we're getting rid of possibly one of the best guards in the game at Trey Smith. I mean, that's what kind of Jawaan Taylor we're going to get in the post Trey Smith era too. That's over me, which I'm kind of scared about that potential.
No, I didn't really see anything as far as covering up any deficiencies from Jawaan. I think Jawaan did a pretty decent job. He held his own on that out there. Obviously, the holding call and him being off sides, and part of that was like I explained to people. Well, part of it is because Trey was lining up in the backfield, further back.
Mm-hmm.
Trey was at times okay. My assessment, okay, as an O-line coach, there were times that Trey's first year to me, and not as much this year, but he would get pushed back. So he would lose ground. You got to set the depth of the pocket at guard. And Trey would get pushed back sometimes at guard. So those were things that would, in my head, I would look at. Obviously, some of the twists that were happening, passing off guys, being on the same level is another thing that teams try to do to get guys off, expose them a little bit. Not saying that we had a huge problem with that, but in some games it would show up that I would see. But as far as like the trade cover for some of Jawaan's deficiency, I didn't really see too much of that. I didn't. I think Jawaan he's a very athletic tackle. I think he's a good tackle. His problem is, the penalties.
Yeah,
that was the problem. Other than that, man, he did a good job for us. So,
yeah. I was just one thing I wanted to ask, just because having a special talent at right guard that can help, maybe possibly if a right tackle has any deficiencies, you maybe having help there. But you didn't see anything, then I trust you.
I didn't see anything that I was just like, oh wow, Trey's, should look it out for this guy, right? I didn't see too much of that. But so I will say, and I haven't said this to a lot, but we've seen at times how many times the guys were getting help. We were still getting chips and stuff like that for tackles.
Yeah,
people just didn't think that was possible when we had OBJ and Wiley here. Well, we don't need guys to get chips. Yeah, you do. I don't care who it is. Everybody needs to get a chip. Everybody, and even if they're not expecting it, you're going to get it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of the deal. You want to help guys out. Sure. If you ain't getting a chip, I'll be looking back like, hey, man, you see some ribs, you hit this sucker. You hit him as hard as you can. Take a couple plays out of it. Mm-hmm. So I just, I think some of those things are kind of funny. When I hear people say things like that. But our O-line overall did a great job for us. I think they did a great job for us last year. That's why I was like, man, I like to see Donovan here for another year. Wanya will be able to come in and take that without a doubt. But
yeah, and then, money, what's that?
But that money, you still got the money. Woo-wee! 26 lead 24/7.
I mean, JD, you can literally take from Caliendo all the way up to Humphrey, and none of those guys even get close to what either one of those guys are making.
Man, yeah. And here's the thing, though. You were talking about some of these guys are like talking about. Look, all the guys are going to be unrestricted free agents next year. I wouldn't even touch having a conversation on signing to these guys. Not at all. You don't have to. You don't have to say nothing to these guys.
Yeah.
You don't guarantee it. What do you mean? Hey, man, you play because we drafted you. Hello, that's what's going to happen. So you stick with us. Okay, we got the rights to you.
Do you anticipate either one of those between Creed or Trey getting a extension this year? Do you anticipate that? No.
I don't see it. Or Bolton either. I don't see any of those guys getting extensions right now. Hey, after this year's over, then we'll have conversation. We'll talk and all of that. But right now, hey, play your position.
Mm-hmm.
Play your part, man.
And if you see, and another question too, that if you see any of those things happen before Chris Jones or L'Jarius Sneed, is that a sign that's not things aren't the conversations aren't going well?
Yeah, you could definitely say that might indication, especially if now if you ain't got money already tied in and you don't know what you're gonna do. Shoot, I might like, hey man, what we doing? What's going on? As the conversation stalled again, I don't know. I'm just talking about with Chris.
Right.
I think these next couple of weeks, man, it's gonna be something else. It's gonna be something else.
Yeah. If I were to make a bet, I would say the next 2 to 3 weeks we'll have something done with either one of those guys. I think this week at the combine, I think it's gonna be a very pivotal week for a lot of teams, but specifically our guys and just trying to either ink up or tag Sneed or Chris Jones.
Yeah. Definitely.
But all right, guys. So that brings us to the end of our episode here. JD, it was an awesome diving in on these big contracts the offensive linemen have on the squad. People think of big contracts, think of the skill players. No. Our offensive line is getting taken care of. They're getting paid good money.
So get broke off, man. A couple jokers up there get broke out really well. Well. So I ain't got no problem with it. I ain't got no problem with it whatsoever. You know, the thing is, when we talking about trying to get other guys in here, it had to be some concession. You know, those guys made make concession to get some other guys to keep guys here. So,
yeah,
these guys get it right. They'll get it right.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out the best clips from Chief Concerns. And if you prefer to listen to the show, subscribe and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.